Lift Up the Vulnerable exists to prevent the trafficking and oppression of vulnerable children and women and empower them to be change makers in their communities. And so we specifically go where children and women are most vulnerable, and there are little to no opportunities or resources or organizations that are working there to stand with them. And I'd love for you each to share, because human trafficking in Sudan and South Sudan looks different. Like, or for each of you, you're experiencing trafficking differently. There are some similarities, there are some overlaps, but I'd love for you to share a little bit more about the different regions that you're operating and how you see human trafficking manifest itself today. What does it look like? Who are the vulnerable and how are they being exploited?
I've been working with New Life Ministry before any kind of the peace in South Sudan or in Sudan. And that's quite been a long time now. And with the situation of those days and these times, the human trafficking has changed. The suffering has changed. The suffering, it has become a different kind of the suffering people are going through every daily life. And actually, what we do and what we have seen, and I've witnessed it myself, that human trafficking, and especially the most vulnerable children, they are being trapped in trafficking at the border between South Sudan and Sudan, and also between South Sudan and Darfur region. Because of the war that has been going on, they have been taken as a slave, and that's where actually the most of the slavery was done, in South Sudan at the border of Darfur and South Sudan and Sudan. And this kind of the situation, it leaves so many vulnerable widows and women, old people, but mainly the slavery, which was there before because of the war. They abduct the people, they take them to be the workers in their farms, they take them to be the sex slaves in their houses, in the northern side and in the Darfur side. So this has been existing for quite a very long time in my area, between the border of South Sudan and Darfur and Sudan. And we find ourselves in a terrible dilemmas where the children and women, they could not help themselves. And they find themselves in so many ways. They are being forced into marrying the old man. You find 14 years and 11 years old, married the old man in the northern side, and also force them into sex, whatever cause, and they become domestic workers in their houses. That's a slavery we talk about. We talk about being trapped into a situation like that, being used as a workers for the cattle and for the farmers. In the other side, they are taken from South Sudan. The people move them at the border, and the trading is going on, because those kind of the criminals, they are very a very unique way of doing the things, trapping the people, and especially targeting the children and most vulnerable people in the area. So they are the one who goes and take care of the cattle and take care of the donkeys and all those kind. It is beyond an imagination of humanity. It is something that we cannot say it is a modern world, but it's still, the suffering is still going on in another part.
Ayub, will you share with us how human trafficking, you've seen it progress over the years, and how are the vulnerable being exploited in the Nuba Mountains?
Shukran. Thank you once again. Human trafficking, the way I look at it, is in the area, in Sudan specifically, in Nuba Mountains. I can define it as if an opportunity that as a result of the war that has been intensified in those areas for many decades. So when I look at that situation, I can see, or I see that many children became vulnerable. Women became vulnerable because of the war. War destroyed everything, destroyed the people's land, houses. It actually made people move. It created a situation whereby nobody is exists in his homeland. As a result, many children fled and they fell into wrong hands, and they are taken as slaves to rear cows. They kept as theirs to rear cows for their own benefit. And women also, especially the girls, the young girls, are taken as to help as a servant in some of the people's houses, and as well as they use them as their wives, or in other words, let me say, they use them as sex workers in their houses, and nowadays, that is during those wars, and nowadays even is more advanced, whereby especially in the areas at the border, I mean the places where the Khartoum government is, that is between the rebel side and the Khartoum government side. People use also opportunities of getting those children who are vulnerable, who could not get an opportunity to be in their families due to the situation that they could not handle. So they can be given some of the things like cows or goats, and then the children are taken to rear as if they are taken for wages, but again, they take them for good, for their own purposes, and they remain there until they become slaves. Actually, they are enslaved in that. This is how they grow. As they grow, they don't know where to go. The only thing they know cows or they know cattle. They know that I'm just shepherd. And in other words, it's like being sold to the other party or the other people for their own benefits. Likewise, the women. Many women could not come back to their villages. They became other people's wives. As a result, in our father's cleft where I lived, I have a sample of 2 Arab girls whom we brought in, but their mothers were from Nuba, and they're there. I occupied them. They're with us. They became so strange even in the community as they came. The way they look different, and as they distinguished, they look different. They became vulnerable inside that communities. As a result, this is how I work with LUV for that anti-traffic and to rescue some of these children who became vulnerable, in which it is not their it's not their fault, and of course that situation of war that caused all that. And some other women also, due to the life, the hardship, and the insecurity, they disappear. And they disappear, and also other people take advantage in that. And they take them as wives, in which they don't accept it, but due to the situation. And in such, actually, we can call it human trafficking as well, because somebody doesn't want to, doesn't accept it.
Yeah, so human trafficking, there's an element of force, fraud, or coercion, and that would fit very much in line with what you're speaking of, these disappearing women who have nowhere to go, and so are taken into households as slaves. And Peter, I'd like to ask you, because human trafficking also, you're in a totally different region along the border of Uganda, and human trafficking manifests itself a little bit differently where you live. But share firstly about how you see human trafficking affecting the children that you're protecting.
Yeah, thank you so much. Human trafficking in our region, it is quite different from the way they practice it in other regions. So in our region, it is something which is underground. It's never like something which is seen like in Nuba and seen like in Western Barghazal, so in Northern Barghazal, because in our place, it's not done in an open area. So people come like secretly into the village and they see opportunity of children who are not protected by the parents, and they will just abduct the children and take them to a unknown location. So that is what's happening in our region. So we had some stories with our kids before they were recruited to come to our facility in Hope, South Sudan. So we had one, of course, so for the purpose of just to maintain that story within our reach. So we can name only the name that people know in the village, and that is Omjuma. This is a child called Omjuma, and that was a child who was whose brother was abducted, and actually in 7 years ago. So before she was recruited in our facility. So the child was going in the bush to collect some fruits, and of course, those guys who organized themselves from a distance, they came almost along from the border of Ethiopia. So they came up to the area and abducted the child. So it was the brother. So it was a risk for kids in the village actually to be left like that, because in those areas where there's no education, so kids just stay in the village and they don't do anything. So these people come and they see opportunity. Where there's opportunity, they take the kids. They take them to a known location. And of course, people tell us that those children are taken up to the border of Ethiopia. So that is the risk that we have with our kids living in our region. So, and this has been done from time to time. People talk about it, the leaders intervene about it, but it's not stopping. And this kind of people doing all this, we have never seen anybody even apprehended or arrested of doing that. So that's why we say it's a subtle practice that is happening in our region. So, and the reason why they do it is unknown. So we just see kids taken. Like I was interacting with one of the leaders in the village. He told us that it's about 60 children who are taken from the village. So of course, small villages around. So about 60. So it's starting from 2004 until 2012. And of course, we haven't gotten the statistic of this year. So of course, but all these things is happening. So the government is aware about it, and the leaders, the local leaders are aware about it, but they do not know exactly who are these people who are all doing this. But they just see a certain group of people is doing it, but we don't know. So in this one, it can endanger the relationship between communities and communities, because there will be a suspicion happening between communities, because the communities will start stereotyping and the prejudice will happen. So you will have to experience the inter-community conflict. So where the tribal conflict, where the neighboring adjacent communities can fight with each other because they might think their kids are taken by that group, and because the people who are practicing it, they're not known. So that is what we're experiencing in our region. So basically in our state, Eastern Equatorial State, and we as leaders and we as sons of the area, we're really concerned about our children being exposed to these dangerous practices that people are doing, the human trafficking. So, and that's why we started a ministry where we have to advocate for these vulnerable children, so that children can come to a facility, and people have to know why children are brought there, why children are recruited from there, so that people can also hear us. When we talk about human trafficking, they will understand why is it existing and why people are doing that, because some people are benefiting out of it anyway. So they sell kids in the way that they think. Maybe they take kids, they sell them in exchange of animals. So others are taken to rare animals. Others are even taken beyond borders, because these kids are not returning. They are not being recovered. I've only seen one kid who was recovered, and that kid even had no parents. The parents are not able to identify. So is just staying now in the hands of people that are not their parents. So these are kids that are rescued by other people. So, and they gotten in the hands of the government. They can identify them, so they couldn't identify. So that was an evidence that human trafficking is existing in the region.
Yeah, thank you so much, Peter. It's so interesting because historically, during the height of war, the raids were really the main way a lot of villagers were taken into human trafficking. So especially in James's area, but not only, because Ayub, when raiders came to villages in the Nuba Mountains, they would really raid and pillage, and the pillage were oftentimes people and the humans were sold into both what you each spoke to was but labor trafficking, human trafficking, sex trafficking rather, and domestic servitude, which is a form of labor trafficking. But also, one aside that you've not yet spoken to, but is very prevalent in all three of your areas, is child soldiering, or being recruited by conscription into militias. And that's also been a practice in your different areas. And I know, James, you've spoken very publicly about your experience with that. And I wondered if you would share just a little bit about how child soldiering crossed your life.
Okay. Well, you know, these are memory stories that are very painful to expose them, but actually they are very important also to let the people know, and let the people know how much sufferings other children went through. And those children, we are the one now taking care of the same situation we were in before. So when we left home, the South Sudan, and we went to Ethiopia, you know, we walked 3 months walk day and night as one of the lost boys. And then it was in the morning in 1987. I didn't know exactly the date, but we were attacked in the morning, and our village was raped, you know. This group came and fired everyone, and shooting gun anywhere and killing everybody they find on the way, killing the children and old women and old people and all those kinds, and abducting the children, taking all the cattle and burning down their houses completely to hatches. And we found ourselves moving toward to Ethiopia, and we walked 3 months walk. And I was less than 9 years old. I came back when Ethiopia got a lot of problem. Also, we came back. And I found myself, I was recruited in this child soldier. I was in military, and I was I was very small, less than 14 years. So went to the war until I was found by the leader and said, we are fighting for such a small children like them to be free from the situation our people are going through for the decades and centuries. So we were mobilized back, and we were taken outside the war, and we were taken to the border for the studies, and we found a way to Uganda. I found the way to Uganda, and the next group came to Kakuma refugees camp, actually, and from there they were given resettlement to United States. So these stories is quite unimaginable stories to talk and to remembering them. But as I mentioned before, the situation I went through myself, it is what I experienced. It is not what I was told or I said, I had it. It is what I went through. And it is not only me. Many other children went through it. And right now, some of the rebels, they're based on that kind of situation. A situation of mobilizing the little children, mobilizing even the women and the girls, young ones, and take them to their camps and use them as sex workers and their workers also in the rebels control areas and other places. A lot of destruction is happening up to now. it is quite painful. When I was given also the resettlement to United States, to come to United States, and I gave up my status, is because I felt I was called, God has called me to go back and care for those who were suffering like me before. And that's the reason I gave up my status and my citizenship of going to United States, and I returned back to South Sudan and I started the orphanage. That's our mission, together with the Live Up the Vulnerable, on how to bring the hope to the people, on how to make sure that we have done our very best to rescue whatever number we can to rescue and to give them the transformation, because they will be the future generation.
Yeah, thank you so much, James. That's really helpful and such a big picture of how human trafficking is manifesting itself, both historically, both personally, and across the land, through the many different lives that are affected in the various ways. You know, preventing human trafficking is our focus, where you mentioned that we do, every center has been a part of rescue and restoration, but our main priority is the prevention, because we want to help children who are vulnerable already, who have already experienced a lot of suffering because of growing up in a war zone, but we want to rescue them before they have to go through the suffering of trafficking itself. And preventing human trafficking in a war zone really requires an agile and integrative approach. So we have to address extreme poverty, instability, lack of infrastructure and resources, which are leaving millions upon millions in Sudan and South Sudan vulnerable and already exploited. So our approach, our team, meaning Lift Up the Vulnerable and all of our Indigenous partners, we're taking a holistic approach by extending practical care, tangible support, and spiritual hope to empower agents of change in their own lives and in their own communities. And these are the essential resources to ending human trafficking in war zones. So we're offering protection. All three of these men and their staff are offering protection, education, and economic empowerment initiatives in their communities.